Hi everyone, Gill here. Welcome to Monday Match Analysis Classics. Today's episode is a conversation with Ben Rothenberg. He's a freelance tennis writer for the New York Times and co-host of the No Challenges Remaining podcast. Ben and I get into one of his favorite matches of all time, the 2009 Wimbledon final between Andy Roddick and Roger Federer. A couple of housekeeping items before I get started. One, a trigger warning. Novak Djokovic has had an up and down week, and I felt the need to get into Djokovic's recent comments about anti-vaccination. So if you're sensitive to that topic, know it's coming. You can skip ahead to where we start talking about the match, or you can skip this altogether, but I'll give you a trigger warning for that. Also, to address the lack of diversity that's just happened as a coincidence, I let the guests choose what match they want to go over, and it just so happens three in a row have been from 2009, two in a row have been with Roger Federer. So just know that I'm going to effort to get some more diversity coming your way. So for the Djokovic folk and the Nadal folk, just know that there will be coverage of your favorite players coming very soon. And lastly, I plan on doing another Q&A on Wednesday. So keep an eye on the community tab, on the main tab of my channel, and also on my Twitter @GillGross, where you will have an opportunity to submit your questions and comments for our Wednesday Q&A. Without further ado, here's Ben Rothenberg. We're joined for the first time by Ben Rothenberg, a freelance tennis writer for the New York Times and co-host of the No Challenges Remaining podcast. Ben, how are you? Thanks for doing this.
I'm very good. Very glad to be here. Thank you for having me. This should be fun.
Yeah, everything is good with you in the quarantine life and all that?
Yeah, so far so good. It's like more than a month into it now, and it's been going fine. You know, feels pretty low stakes in some ways. You know, there's not much to do each day. So when something like this comes along, I'm happy to jump on it and get, projects to do. So this is good.
Absolutely. You strike me as a man of good taste. Any tennis quarantine content recommendations, Ben?
I honestly have not been doing too much like rewatching of things. I have not been watching Tennis Channel or what they're re-airing or doing too many deep dives. I've been reading a few books. The one book that we're doing next, I'll plug NCR a bit here, but we're doing next on No Challenges Remaining is this book from 1990 by John Feinstein called Hard Courts, which is about the tour in the year 1990. And it's a dense but good read. It's a good quarantine filler. It's like 450 pages of small font about tennis 30 years ago. So yeah, people were looking for something that will take up time and also be enjoyable.
I like it.
It's pretty good.
Well,
yeah.
What's your favorite evergreen piece you've ever written?
Oh gosh. Evergreen. I like a few things I've got to do that are longer. I spent more time doing. Obviously, I'm more attached to probably a couple of things I've done for Racket magazine, whether it's about court siding. I did something on Monique Violi, who is a super hyped prodigy who got wrapped up with Donald Trump, and also just weird stuff there in the late 90s. I did one on the those are the main ones. I'll stick with those two answers, I guess, for now. Yeah.
All right. Check those out, everyone. So we're going to get into the 2009 Wimbledon final, Roger Federer, Andy Roddick. But just before we do that, it's been a wild week for Novak Djokovic. The beginning, the first thing that comes through the news cycle is that he's setting up this relief fund for lower ranked players. And that's obviously a really positive story. And I would say everyone kind of took that really well. And then a more controversial, to put it kindly, development that just broke last night is that he kind of said that he would be opposed to being forced to have a coronavirus vaccination. It's a little bit unclear if he's just umbrella anti-vax or if he's anti-coronavax. But I mean, Ben, what was your reaction to that?
To your second point first, I do think that the most straightforward reading of it was that he started out saying that he's sort of umbrella anti-vax and then went more specific on potentially having mandatory travel vaccines for coronavirus, which would fit into the umbrella statement at the start. But also he's saying that he's against a vaccine that hasn't even been invented yet. So That seems like a pretty blanket statement. Like you're against a vaccine that we don't even know anything about yet. Does not exist yet. So that would seem to be a fairly straightforwardly, clear ideological position that's not just about one specific product or invention or concept or whatever. It's one of those things, like, people who follow Djokovic are not super surprised by this, just because he has had such a specific and interesting rejection of a lot of sort of standardly held medical beliefs in Western medicine theory and, generally accepted things. He's been pretty contrarian on a lot of stuff, and believes a lot of things and says a lot of things that have helped him, when it all the way back to his gluten allergy, when that's sort of when the first sort of side of this of Djokovic came out. And he had, sort of crazy stories in his book about how they tested his allergy by holding a piece of bread against his skin and he started to feel weak. I mean, there's sort of odd, things in there. And he's talked about, more recently about his reluctance to have surgery because he feels like the body should be able to heal itself, and things like that. So, I mean, Djokovic is kind of going to his completely own drummer on health issues generally. And so, so this was, if a top player was going to say this was the least shocking top player to say it. But still, it's been interesting to see how this has been a story that's already broken out outside of tennis. And part of that is I think that a lot of molehills are going to turn into mountains in quarantine time because there's so little news in sports, that if he made this statement, during a normal sports cycle in a normal month of April when there's playoffs going on in sports and other things, maybe it wouldn't have quite the resonance it has. But this has been a big story on a lot of news networks. And it's something that I hope that he can clarify. I know we've reached out to him for a comment with the New York Times and to his team, and other places as well, I'm sure, are doing that also. But I think that it would take a pretty, I don't share the Djokovic fans' reluctance with the quote that was shared by Reuters. I think that was a Serbian reporter translating it from the Serbian and made it seem pretty straightforward. I think that they're just sort of searching for ambiguity that I don't think is really there, honestly.
I'll share one of my takes, and feel free to disagree with me.
Yeah.
But it's one thing if a public official says something like this, or someone of actual maybe legislative importance says this. But when a professional athlete says something along these lines that could actually, be damaging to public health, and I don't agree with anti-vax sentiment. I'm willing to say that. Why should that be published? I mean, is it irresponsible to even publish this? I don't think that this should be a story.
Look, he said it in a public forum. I mean, it's not like this was a private conversation that he was having. This was a publicly broadcast thing in Serbian to a Serbian audience. I don't know how many people were watching, but it was something that he had shared, I think, on his social media, that he was going to be doing this broadcast with these other Serbian athletes. So, I mean, it's already out there. I don't have a problem necessarily with Reuters then for translating this. I don't think that's really their role to sort of suppress that once it's out there. And the stakes of having it be a public figure, I mean, it's obviously less damaging if he says this versus if, Anthony Fauci says this, or someone who's, in a trusted position of health, or even someone who's a politician who maybe has more authority. But there are still anti-vax people, and I'm not an expert on the anti-vax movement at all, but there are still anti-vax people, like Jenny McCarthy, I know, is one of them, who's an actress or a TV host or whatever she calls herself, as a public figure. And, her having a platform from that other status can amplify these views, which can cause people harm. And I think that Djokovic, if he is indeed expressing the anti-vax sentiment that he seems to be, is a general blanket thing. If he has people who listen to him, and look, a lot of fans are sort of, some of his fans are not. A lot of I've seen several of his fans being like, this is rough, I can't defend this. But others of his fans are saying, he's just being misunderstood. Or they're going all the way to saying, yes, vaccines are bad, clearly. And who knows if they would have actually said that if Djokovic hadn't said it or not, how much they're just following their role model. So that's where it becomes a potentially dangerous thing, when a number one player in the world, best player in the world right now, is sort of using his platform to espouse such beliefs.
Sure. So let's get to this match. I gave you a list of options, Ben, and you were particularly enthusiastic. We can't seem to get out of 2009, by the way. I've done this with a few other
good
people.
Year. Yeah, good year, though.
A really good year. So what stood out about this match? Why did you want to go back and watch it?
The options you gave me, it was definitely, I mean, first of all, I would have picked it out of a longer list, I bet, also, because this is one of the matches I remember having the strongest reaction to watching it live, and just being the most sort of affected by the outcome of it, and really living and dying with this match, and feeling like I died at the end of this match a little bit, pulling mostly for Andy Roddick, as I was when this match was going on. definitely for Andy Roddick, 100% for Andy Roddick during this match. And not that I disliked Federer, but just the stake. We can get into this, but the stakes were so different for these two guys in this match, even if Federer didn't totally seem to get that in the trophy ceremony. And it was also just a match that was, I think, one of those times where it was two very different people with different careers in this way that most Big Four matches just don't play that way for me. I mean, Big Four versus Big Four, where, even Murray, to the extent, once Murray got on the board, Murray was so after 2012, Murray had already won his slam, and I guess Wimbledon 2013, he got his next slam fairly quickly. Wimbledon was his missing thing as a British player. But this was a match where these are two guys in very different stages of their careers. It felt like with very different stakes, with different things going for them. And it was really it was sort of the end of an era in a lot of ways. I mean, I think Andy Roddick represented an old school sort of player or sort of figure on tour in a way that these sort of immortals of the Big Four don't. And so this was sort of the last battle of those earlier immortals versus these current immortals. And it was crazy to me thinking, watching this match, that a lot of people would have been could have easily thought at the time, oh yeah, Federer comes back and is, after losing a tough final, which a lot of people thought in a way it was a passing of the torch in it all, he comes back and wins one more, and good for him for getting one more. But 10 years later, he's still getting championship points in the Wimbledon final. He didn't go away at all. This is mid-career or early mid-career, depending on how you want to call it, Federer, which is nuts that these guys have kept going. And that's what one of the interesting, this is a different topic, but one of the reasons why Federer and Nadal 08, I feel has not aged to feel particularly important now, because both those guys are still so relevant and still on top of the game 12 years later. That match didn't change everything, in my opinion, that 08 match, even though at the time it really felt like a real end of an era, new takeover. They're both still great 12 years later. So yeah, but with Roddick, this was Roddick's last Grand Slam final, his last real shot at getting one of the four things he'd always wanted. He talked in his career pretty openly about how he had four goals coming in. He wanted to win the US Open, to become number one, to win Davis Cup, and to win Wimbledon. And he gotten three of the four by then, and this was his best shot at getting the fourth, and it eluded him despite many, many close calls in this match.
Right. To your point about Federer, I have a quote from Pete Sampras. He said, yeah, he's a great player, talking about Federer. He's got 15 now. He could get 17, 18 majors when it's all done. Try again, Pete. You were a little low there, even on the end of your range. But certainly for Roddick, he had won the 2003 U.S. Open. Did not win. Since that slam final that he was successful in, he had been in three finals, lost all three of them to Roger Federer. So this is, again, bumping into Federer, a guy who was 18-2 head-to-head against Roddick. It really seemed like Roddick was in a group of players whose careers were just destroyed by the existence of Roger Federer.
100%. And Roddick would have won, I think, at least, because not just the finals, but a bunch of semifinals and quarterfinals where he also lost to where Roddick also lost to Federer. I think Roddick could have comfortably had 5 slams without Federer there, at least. And, you never know how things shift. Maybe it's even more. Maybe he gets even more confident. Maybe other players step up and can figure Roddick out if Federer doesn't come to suck up all the oxygen on the tour in sort of what was Roddick's prime. Roddick won his first slam after Federer won his first slam. It was one slam later in 03. So he, and finished that year number one, I believe, in 2003. So he did have his shots. It wasn't total takeover. And I actually was at the last match they ever played in Miami 2012, which Roddick won, kind of funnily enough. It was Roddick in this very lopsided rivalry got the last sort of laugh there. But yeah,
didn't he propose to his wife Brooklyn before that match?
Oh, that I don't remember. I'm not sure.
Okay, I saw that on
possible.
Wikipedia. And
okay, maybe Wikipedia is usually right about things. Funnily enough,
usually.
I mean that not as a joke. They usually are pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other thing I'll say about Sampras, you mentioned him. It's wild that this was a big passing the torch moment, finally getting over Sampras, and now 11 years later, Sampras is distant fourth place on this list. He's no longer on the podium of most men's Grand Slams, and it's just funny that how quickly that shifted, how quickly Sampras and I would put Roddick in sort of the Sampras lane of player, being an American who has a big weapon or big weapons and big serve, is not not an all-surface player, which is what everybody is now. Sampras was not an all-surface player. Roddick was not an all-surface player, and they were aggressive guys. And yeah, it's interesting that they're at the end of an era, and Roddick says in his speech, sort of says to Pete, sorry, I couldn't, hold off the record for you a little bit. And it does really feel like they were part of the same breed. And this is that kind of breed's last real hurrah in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
A Grand Slam final stage for sure.
Well, that's where I want to start with Sampras. Federer looking to win his 15th slam to pass Pete, and Pete's late to the match. So
yes,
it's at 2-1, the first changeover when they finally let in Pete. And if he was on time, he wouldn't have had this dramatic grand entrance. But
I almost wondered if that was intentional. I almost wondered if it was intentional because BBC showed him. And Wimbledon is an interesting place in that it's very quiet, because people will just sort of gawk at the royal box and will look and see who's there. Oh, look, Will and Kate are there. Oh, hey, look, that lady from Great British Bake Off is there. Whatever, British celebrities happen to be there on that day. And so maybe they thought that Pete would get a real, because also at Wimbledon, they wouldn't be which they would do at the US Open, they would show him on the Jumbotron, or they would have an announcement ladies and gentlemen, Pete Sampras, and everyone would cheer, more directed. In Wimbledon, they kind of have to do it subtle and just hope that everyone notices this one man walking to his seat. Which did not, and the announcer, actually, I did notice that part. The announcer said oh, wait, there's going to be a big applause here, for this. There really wasn't. I don't think that many people were looking at that, especially because people do get to their seats on time at Wimbledon.
It's a bit of a reaction.
But not like it would have been if it had been actually been on the screen, and it'd been a little, a chyron that was Federer trying to equal Sampras's record like it would be at the US Open or at the other 3 slams. Honestly, they would have made it much more apparent what it was there, but Wimbledon loves being subtle.
Yes. Federer said hello to him. Sampras was front row in the royal box, which is obviously just beyond the far baseline if you're watching on TV. And Federer actually said hello to Pete. Does that surprise you?
If they've knew each other. I think they'd already done. I don't know if they had already done their EXO tour by then. They probably had. They did this EXO tour with each other. I forget what year that was, but they knew each other pretty well. And and you are close to people at a tennis match. I mean, some people are very tunnel vision and not attracted by the crowd. Other people, Nick Kyrgios, very far into the spectrum, will talk to people in the front row of the crowd and engage and kind of banter with them. So yeah, not shocking that he would just say hello, because you don't want to be awkward for 4 hours and pretend like you don't see the guys there. When you see the guys there, just be chilling. Say hi to Pete Sampras. Why not?
He was being polite. 5-6 in the first set. Federer is serving. There are no breaks up until this point. And a couple of really strong baseline points from Roddick where he hits a strong counter backhand down the line to draw an error, and then another backhand down the line. So, the first one was a cross-court backhand. But the point is, Roddick's backhand, normally a weakness, was really good throughout this match, and
really
he
good,
steals the first set with it.
Well, because even in the 5-all game before that, he had saved a bunch of break points. Federer really made his push in a very Sampras fashion. Sampras would always kind of lollygag through a set, and then once he came within a game of winning the set, he would really put the burners on and try to get a break. So Federer put up his fight at 5-all and didn't break through, and had a bit of a letdown game, arguably, in the next game, and Roddick really pounced, and Roddick did not have any let up. Yeah, and the backhand was good throughout the match. A lot of backhand down the line winners you wouldn't normally associate with Roddick, and that Federer, I think, really didn't see coming, because he'd played, like you said, Roddick 20 times before this, so he knew the patterns that would work for him, even on grass, knowing that Roddick was playing well. And that's one thing we should point out too. Roddick was having a very good 09. He was a bit rejuvenated in his career. It was a different look Roddick. I think he'd lost a little bit of weight. He was playing a little bit more all court than he had been recently. He had a really good run at Wimbledon to get to this final, beating Leighton Hewitt in 5 in the quarters and beating Andy Murray in 4 in the semis, which was a big upset, really. People did not expect Andy Roddick to win that match. So I think that maybe all these great. It's confusing. Federer was a bit confused by seeing, probably a bit not expecting Roddick to do exactly what he did game-wise. And and Roddick pounced early, and then in second set, we can get to the second set tiebreak next. I think it's the next big event.
Sure,
but
it's probably that's where we're going.
And then Roddick getting all the way to 6. I had forgotten just how big the lead was in the tiebreak before. I knew he had a lead in the tiebreak. I knew he had set points in the tiebreak, but I did not remember that it was 6-2. Yikes. 6-2 with 2. Yeah. Which goes fast. I mean, that's only 2 points on your serve. In the first one, it'd be probably better for him if he'd had consecutive points on his serve. If he'd been
Hmm.
not serving at 6-2 and had the 6-3 and the 6-4 points on his serve. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was rough.
To your point about Roddick being a little bit rejuvenated, one more note is that he did have a new coach, Larry Stefanke,
Yeah.
who we introduced. But yeah, this second set, look, I mean, neither player, and this persists throughout the match, neither player is really putting a lot of returns in play. The first serve percentage on both sides is routinely like around 90%. So again, another tie break. But yeah, Roddick goes up 6-2 in this tiebreak. So Federer at 6-2 actually plays a really nice backhand cross-court half volley from the baseline for a winner. A service winner at 3-6, an ace at 4-6. Now it's 6-5. This is Roddick's chance on serve, and he has it. It's right there.
This is the most famous point of the match. Yeah,
Yes.
This is the most famous point of the match. And Roddick comes in, and I rewatched this volley many times in this. I probably watched it 5 or 6 times to see like how bad is this miss. I don't think it's that bad. It was a very high volley. It was a backhand volley. I mean, like it was a smart place with the ball. I'm not 100% sure if the ball would have landed in. That's the other question I have because this ball was, again, pretty high. It might have had a lot of topspin and dove back in, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll never know if that ball would have landed in or not. And yeah, and Roddick's not known for being an amazing volleyer. Like he's pretty good, but it was a kind of a wishful approach. It wasn't that great. That's the other thing I'll say about this match that also makes it stand out. You're talking about the serve percentages. Like this is the last Wimbledon final, I think, between two like really like pure grass courters playing like kind of old school what we think of as grass court tennis. Like because all the others since then would have involved either Murray, Djokovic, or Nadal, or more than one of them. And they're all like pretty strict baseliners and kind of counterpunchers in their own way. And that's not what's happening in Roddick and Federer at all. They're both playing pretty aggressive grass court attacking tennis. And so that's also why, you know, when I wrote down when it got to 5-all in the first set, it took like 25 minutes to get there, which is something you would never see in a match that's involving any of those other 3 other guys.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about the volley is it didn't need to be very good. And I think that's the worst part about the volley is because he didn't hit the strings. He shanked it. I think the reason why the volley was so ugly and startling is because Federer was off the court. If Andy hit his strings on this volley and put it in the court, I think it would have been good enough.
I also just don't think he misses that shot if he hadn't missed 3 set points in a row leading up to it. I think the pressure and the nerves of having that be your 4th out of your quadruple set point is why that shot becomes much tougher. And yes, it was not like an all-time bad miss. I really don't think so. It was not an easy shot. That was a tough passing shot that was hit. That's an awkward position. No one really hits great backhand volleys high up there unless you're like, Edberg or like Suzanne Longlon or someone who's always like jumping and twirling up there. That's not what Roddick ever did. So yeah, it was not the worst miss. It obviously came at a crucial point. And we can argue whether or not that's the point that really swung the match. It's only in the second set, so it's hard to say that. Right. And also, we don't know, like, and that's another big what if that people are talking about after this match, if Roddick wins that point and goes up 2-0, does he automatically win this match? And I'm not sure. I don't think it's that simple. I think, the year before, Federer had just come back from 2 sets down to force a 5th set against Nadal. Yeah, whether it was everything, I kind of think that, like, even though we'll get to these later, but even though he didn't have as clear a chance at them, like the break points he had in the 5th set were probably a lot closer to actually turning the match to being a Roddick win.
Yeah, I mean, to Roddick's credit, he did rebound pretty well. Besides going to the wrong side of the court after he took a bathroom break at the tail end of the second set.
Good catch.
Yeah, but I mean, after that debacle, I mean, he really did play some good tennis. It's another tiebreak in the 3rd set, and this was a much cleaner, a really strong tiebreak from Federer. It would have been difficult for Andy to grab that.
It was a little similar in that I think I remember seeing highlights of this match afterwards, or mid-match highlights on the NBC broadcast at least. And it was, again, Roddick's sort of like net play that got him in trouble. He missed like a sort of half volley backhand chip thing. And I think in 1-all the tiebreak, or maybe 2-1, that put Federer up a pretty early mini break in that 3rd set tiebreak. And yeah, it was kind of straightforward from there. It was a much less adventurous tiebreak than the other one. But so then Roddick is 0-2 in tiebreaks, which is wild because they've said in this match that he was 26-4 in tiebreaks in 2009 coming into this final, which is a crazy rate for anybody. And then to go 0-2 in this final in tiebreaks is pretty brutal.
Tim Henman had a stat that Federer was 16-3 in tiebreaks in Grand Slam finals. So two excellent tiebreak players. But the fourth
Yeah.
set, Roddick doesn't need one. At 1-2, Federer serving. Roddick plays a really strong game. And again, at 30-40, it's a two-shot pass on the backhand side. I think the kind of ball that Federer, when he played Roddick, was used to winning, but Roddick was able to come up with the goods here and get the break.
And again, I sort of pointed this to being a throwback kind of match. Like, this is kind of how matches used to go more often, where a player would have a clear, weaker wing, and the opponent would know to attack that wing on big points.
And go to the net.
It would be kind of right, and it would kind of be, they would know, okay, I'm going to make my money by hitting balls in big points and big moments to Andy Roddick's backhand, knowing that it'll be a good percentage play. And yes, maybe he'll make a couple, but overall, this is how I'll win matches. And that's one of the things that players talked about. I remember Agassi talking about this when Sampras was coming up. Sorry, Agassi talking about this when Federer was coming up. A lot of players involved in this chat, where he said, like, it was the first time he'd played an opponent where he didn't really feel like there was a safe space on the court, like a really clear pattern. And then obviously Nadal exploited Federer's backhand with great aplomb for many years after that. But overall, I think those were pretty clear patterns that guys would use, and that sort of these big four guys were changing that, where they didn't really have the sort of more lopsided games that Roddick represented. And so Roddick his backhand was holding up, which was kind of the story of this match in a lot of ways, in terms of why it was competitive and why he was able. And he also didn't get broken. That's the other thing we should say. Roddick does not get broken in this match until the very last game of the match. And that was the other big story, that he was saving all the break points in the match.
Another big point in this fourth set is at 4-2 30 all, 21 stroke rally, longest of the match. Federer not overly aggressive, wasn't really taking initiative, and that was a big point that Roddick pulled through and held serve for 5-2. Roddick takes the fourth set 6-3. Now we'll jump to the fifth, and what did you think of the entertainment value of this fifth set?
It doesn't have the tension it has, obviously, watching it live when you already know when you know exactly what the score is of the fifth set. It takes a bit of it deflates it a bit. Actually, to that point, like, kind of the first four sets were a little bit more, just on pure rewatch I'm talking about, a little more things. I didn't remember exactly when in the fourth set Roddick broke. I didn't remember exactly when certain things happened in the earlier sets. But yeah, I mean, they were both playing well, and it was pretty clean. And I like, I'm someone, as I'm not a big fan of best of five generally, as people probably know, but I do like long final sets. I do think that they're really cool. As an NHL fan, I love, like, an indefinite overtime and just having somebody have to wait it out and win that way. And that sort of no finish line in sight, that attrition error, I think is really, really cool. And this match did it well, and did it pretty efficiently too. I mean, it wasn't a slog out there. The games got pretty snappy for the most part in this fifth set. And like you see, compared to the year before, there were some rain delays the year before in 08, but it finished nearly complete darkness at that match in 08. But 09, there was still plenty of light left by the end of a set that was almost twice as long as the scoreboard.
Right. It's funny because with the new rules, this would have been a 14-all tiebreak.
12-all, yeah.
A 12-all, excuse me, a 12-all tiebreak. And what do you think? I mean, I like the 6-all. I think everyone should just do what the U.S. Open does. But this was an interesting match to watch because, you kind of saw how it played out with the old traditional rules.
Yeah, I don't like the best final set tiebreaks. My favorite format in tennis is what the women used to play, the three Grand Slams, which is best of three and then no tiebreak final set, just because I think that, I don't know, I feel like when you're past 6-all in the final set, it's the best part of the match. Like, why shorten that part of the match? It's sort of my whole take on that. And so, I mean, like, everyone was tuning into this match. People, I don't know if this was kind of early Twitter, so I'm not sure how much Twitter was a factor at the 09 Wimbledon final, but people will be like, wow, tune into NBC. Like, it's like 10-all, it's 11-all. This is crazy. Wow, I've never seen these numbers on a scoreboard before. This is awesome. And those sort of things, I think, are moments that tennis really benefits from, even in the extreme examples. Like 1 year later, there was Isner Mahut at Wimbledon. And, that was obviously ridiculous going to 70-68, but it was also a major story in the wider world that was on every news broadcast everywhere. And it was a big story outside tennis. So those kind of that's a bit more freak show, that scoreline. But I do think that those longer matches really can become very captivating. And the length was not crazy in this match. And the length was, I think it finished like around 4 hours, like 15, 20 minutes, something like that in the end.
Right.
And so it was not like, that's shorter than a lot of, matches. Like I'm sure like whatever Djokovic Nadal semi there was there a couple of years ago was longer than 4:20. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, the points were certainly pretty short for the most part. Federer served 50 aces. I know that was a career high at the time. Roddick served 27. I'm sure it's still probably got to be a career high, although I don't know that for certain.
But I'm not sure with Roddick hit. I mean, that's the interesting thing. Also,
No. I meant Federer's 50 is still a career high.
That could be. I think that people, but also that's interesting that people talk about Roddick being all serve, and he has half as many aces roughly as Federer in this match, and that shows how A, Federer's serve is really underrated, and B, how well as smart a server Roddick is. Because I'm sure Roddick's number of unreturned serves is way higher than that. He doesn't always go for the clean, blasted ace, but he can really set up a missed return or a 1-2 punch kind of point pretty routinely.
Body serve was huge in this match. It was a really good serve for Roddick, and that doesn't show up on the score sheet in the ace category. So let's jump ahead to this game at 14-15. The end of the day, Federer gets 6 returns in play in this game and wins all 6 points. I mean, this wasn't a case, and I think this is kind of what Federer could normally rely on a little bit when he played Roddick. It's not like he was getting every serve in play. It's just when he had an advantage. And in this match, Roddick was just up to the task until this last game.
Yeah, no, I think that it was just a war of attrition in a lot of ways in this last set. And Federer had gone through, gosh, I could do the math, but something roughly like 30, 40, somewhere between 30 and 40 return games without breaking. And that could be bad for his morale. But also, serving second, I think, is a rough thing for Roddick in this final set. Because the second that he gets down break point, and Roddick did have a couple break points earlier in the 5th set, I believe at 8-all. He had 2 break points, which with Federer hit pretty big serves and saved pretty quickly. It's a lot of pressure. This first time he faced a break point, it is a championship point, and the crowd at Wimbledon does what it does on championship points, especially after 4 hours. They're getting very excited. They were probably pretty evenly split. I think slightly pro Federer in this match, but Roddick had a lot of goodwill at Wimbledon. It was probably one of the least pro Federer crowds at a Grand Slam final ever, even if it was 60%. So it's it's just it's a lot building up to that moment. And then, the way he misses that shanked forehand on, which he hadn't shanked a forehand like that all day. And then the way he does that on the match point is still brutal.
Yeah, he did shank he didn't hit the forehand at love 15 cleanly either, but I agree. I mean, his forehand was so on point the entire match. And in this game, it just all crumbles. And it was a war of attrition. When it comes to focus and physicality, it's just who's going to be first to play that sloppy game. And it was Roddick. Lo and behold, he never makes another Grand Slam final. Federer passes Sampras and goes way past Sampras eventually. Now he's at 20. It's almost like we took Roddick for granted, though, in terms of American tennis, because, I mean, he's on the heels of McEnroe, Connors, and then Agassi, Sampras, and then, with your Couriers in there. And then it's almost like, all we have is Andy Roddick now. And in hindsight, now American tennis doesn't have anything close to Andy Roddick.
Not even remotely close. So I gotta say, I was a big Andy Roddick fan, or he was definitely my favorite relevant men's player. I had some obscure players I liked a lot, but that's kind of how I rolled. But Andy Roddick was of legitimate contenders was my favorite, and I think that he really did carry the torch single-handed for a long time and really kept American men's tennis with any sort of foot near being contending on a world stage. And yes, James Blake I think was top 5 briefly, but Blake never won a Masters, never got to a Slam semi, was not really at that Roddick level, and it was only kind of there very briefly. But Roddick was a very good standard bearer for the sport. He was very charismatic, which counted for a lot. He was a kind of classic celebrity in a way that American men's tennis has come nowhere close to having since then. I mean, Andy Roddick hosted SNL after he won his Grand Slam. He was that kind of guy who was a public pop culture figure, and that does matter. It really does matter for the relevance of the sport in this country. or men's tennis at least. Women's tennis is still doing great, but men's tennis has not had that kind of figure since Andy Roddick, even remotely close to it. And so that does matter. And that's why I skip ahead to the end of his career or post-career, but like why him making Hall of Fame, as a one slam winner was, I thought, kind of a complete shoo-in, because he really, he did make 6 Grand Slam finals. He lost 5 of them to Federer, and won the one against not Federer that he played against Ferrero in 2003. And yeah, he was that good. He was really one who kept American men's tennis afloat. And yes, no one really followed up after him. Yes, John Isner's had a solid career, but John Isner being the best America had for the better part of the last decade represents a massive drop-off. That's another reason why this is a throwback match, because it was an American man in a Grand Slam final. It hasn't happened since then. So it really was the end of an era in a lot of ways. And it's tough. And there's a lot of talk after this match, I remember, on message boards about this jacket that Federer puts on in the trophy ceremony. I don't know if you remember this. I don't know how much BBC dwelt on it. I kind of skimmed through the trophy ceremony here, but yeah, he has a number 15 on the jacket, which was sort of his like champion jacket, like a normal person would wear. Not normal person, but like a NBA player or a World Series winner would wear after they win, that sort of championship hat type thing. Right. And some people thought that was like arrogant and presumptuous or whatever, or that it was like disrespectful to Roddick, who was just trying to get like 2 and you have 15. I didn't really read it that way, but it does show just like that Roddick was really the last kind of guy of that sort of challenger class. I mean, I guess the current best analog would be like a Wawrinka, who's sort of floating around. But Wawrinka, honestly, I don't think was ever as relevant as Roddick was, because Wawrinka's wins kind of come out of nowhere. He was never number 1. He was never even number 2. I guess he might have been number 3 at some point. Was he ever number 3 even? He probably was.
I want to say he was.
Either way, he was never number 2. Let's put it that way. So Roddick was number 2 for a long time, and was number 1 briefly. So, I just think Roddick represented this sort of challenge that came and went. And also, he's the last guy to really have a short career and to quit when he plausibly had good tennis left. Right. When his body had not broken, it was not totally gone. He had shoulder issues, but he was not.
I think he was losing that right shoulder. And, when it comes to a big server like Roddick, I think he was concerned that his miles per hour was about to take a dip.
But I also think that he was also somebody who just didn't want to hang around for the sake of hanging around. When he thought that he could no longer legitimately contend for slams, and one of the matches I think really a couple matches sent signals to him, is he lost at Wimbledon that year in 2012 to Ferrer, which I think he saw as a really bad grass loss. When you talk about the kind of grass player he was and how Ferrer represents nothing that ever would have worked on grass in a previous era, that Ferrer beat him pretty cleanly. I think that was a wake-up sign that, like, hey, this game is kind of passing me by. And then at the Olympics later that summer, he got clobbered by Djokovic, also on grass, also I think on center court at Wimbledon. And those two back-to-back, I think, really were kind of – and even though he was still a solid top 20 player, he'd won 2 titles that summer in Eastbourne and Atlanta. So he was still, like, picking up money and hardware and doing good things on tour, but he just had this sort of, like – he kind of thought there was a time to call it quits when he was 30, again, which is an old school thing to do. That's like when a lot of top players previously retired. We don't see that anymore. So Andy Roddick, I think, is in a lot of ways, even though he's the same age as Federer, roughly, I think, he's of a different generation in a lot of different ways, I think.
Right. And Roddick's still around the game, got a great personality, funny.
He's coming back. He had been gone for a while. I mean, it was publicly, but the Tennis Channel coming back during this quarantine has been a unexpected silver lining of the quarantine. Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun. He's also got a foundation, and him and his wife have been very charitable throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. Last one, Ben, because you mentioned the jacket, and it just reminded me. Has there ever been a better Federer outfit, or let's keep it a Wimbledon, or maybe everything? I mean, he had the pinstripes, the gold, the classic Federer logo, kind of like under his buttons on his collar. I really think that's the best Federer has ever, and Nike have ever put together.
It's tough for me to say too much with Federer and Nike because they're all kind of similar. They're all white and the details change a bit, but you're right. This was a very, very strong kit. I mean, there were no pants this year, I don't think. When the pants came around, they were a bit much. When he would walk out there in the full length, like flannel, like the old school guys used to do, and then awkward to pull them off over his sneakers. I think this is good Federer. This is classic Federer. And Federer, and again, like I say, it's still wild to me that, like, there's no other player who you would ever see, maybe the exception of the Williams sisters, who you would see like in what we thought was the end of their career. We really thought this like people did think this could be Federer's like swan song, like his last hurrah, his last contention, 09 Wimbledon, gets the one more, and especially loses to Del Potro at the next slam, and maybe that's him getting ushered out by a new generation. But then, but he's still here. Like 10 years later, he's still like the guy in so many ways in tennis. Even if he's hurt and not number one now, he's still the face of the sport and still very much a relevant factor in the sport. And that's pretty cool. And that's pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Anyway, really appreciate you coming on and, watching this match back with me and all that.
No, I was glad to do it. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Stay safe. Be well.
You too.